Hello, and welcome to Totally Schway Flipside, a podcast about things that aren't necessarily involved with the DCAU.
That's the official title.
My name is Mary.
My name is Luke. Can I just, sorry, before you get started, Mary, I just need to apologise to everyone that I have got a stinking cold. My throat is just unpleasant at the moment. I don't think it comes across too much in my voice, but, you know, if you hear me sniffle or clear my throat a little bit, that's why.
I don't know who gave it to you, but...
Well, I know it was you, because you were sick the other day.
And today we're going to talk about 2 episodes of X-Men 97. Episode 6 and Episode 7. So Episode 6 is Lifedeath Part 2. Mm-hmm. And Episode 7 is Bright Eyes. Now, Lifedeath starts out awful. And not awful as in, like, the episode is awful. It's in, you know, the aftermath of what happened in episode 5. Mm-hmm. And we are in the feels, as we should be. And we're trying to reckon with what happened still. Mm-hmm. And it's sad. It's incredibly... see these things with people that did the DCAU stuff and the Marvel stuff of, you know, of the 90s, and I have no idea how they got an animated show to make me feel like I was actually watching TV, because this type of stuff happens. Obviously not on this scale, but it happens all of the time in our everyday lives. Obviously not necessarily mutants, but it happens, and it just sucks. And you kind of understand what the characters are going through, but not really. And I think the understanding and the confusion of it all is odd, but it's such a good thing.
The thing I found most interesting about this episode is obviously all those awful things happened in Genosha. Mm-hmm. But at this point, Storm and Forge are not aware of it.
No.
Professor X is not aware of it out in the Shi'ar Empire.
Unavailable.
And when he becomes aware of it,
it's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And I've said that so many times, but when because these are his X-Men. These are his kids. These are his children. And when he is... You know, this is later on in the episode, but when he finds out, he is doing something completely different. He is trying to do what he taught the X-Men to do. Mm-hmm. He's trying to peacefully fix something, you know, and then all of a sudden you see, you know, it come to him because he sees Gambit, and then the transformation. But we'll get to that in a few moments.
All right, fine.
Yeah. I want to talk about the other stuff first.
Fine.
Okay, so I've got some notes. Did you make notes this time?
They're all in my head.
Smart people. So, my first note is the return of Charles.
Yeah, because at the end of the original X-Men animated series, he was assassinated by Gyrick, shot on live TV with a laser gun that essentially, you know, for all intents and purposes, killed him. Now, Lilandra turns up as he's in his deathbed and says, well, using Shi'ar medicine, we can help him, but he'll never be able to come back. Mm-hmm. So, for all intents and purposes, he was dead if he was never able to come back.
So there is a reason. On my notes, there's Charles... And then there's Professor Xavier. Mm-hmm. Because we have the return of Charles. Even though Charles Charles just went through the cosmos and whatever. But Charles did that. Mm-hmm. I don't think we see Professor X until we see what happens in his vision of Gambit. I think that's when we see Professor Xavier come back.
I would argue that Professor X came back when he took control of the Shi'ar with his powers. That's when he became Professor X again.
We have different opinions.
Yeah, because they are fighting.
Yeah.
And he just takes control of their minds and makes them sit in the classroom, and he gives them a lecture.
He's basically putting them on the naughty step.
He is, basically, and he is adopting the role of the
Yeah.
teacher at that point. So that's why I view it as the return of Professor X. Now, he is massively patronising towards them, but that doesn't change the fact that everything he says is correct.
Yeah, I have a note on that particular scene. If only Professor X could take our world leaders and put them in the same scenario. Basically putting them all on the naughty step, saying, no, this is not okay. We need to peacefully do these things. I put that note on there because that's just, like I said, on my Instagram, it says something that you told me before. It was like a line, the teachings of Charles Xavier. And that's kind of like what I try to do my life with. If every world leader was like that.
Yes.
So yeah, that was my note on that. And also just naughty step.
Yes. I think I've said this before, but my least favourite thing about the X-Men is when they go into space and interact with the Shi'ar. I find that just not at all compelling in the slightest. I know a lot of people really love things like the Dark Phoenix saga and, you know, all the stuff with Lilandra and the Imperial Guard and the Emkran Crystal, and I just find it really tedious. I prefer the real world metaphorical stuff.
Yeah.
But, you know, this episode is decent, solid. And I know that's only half of the episode because it's split between what's going on with Storm and Forge as well.
There was one more thing.
Please go on.
I wanted to talk about, and I put sister stuff. I did not go any further in my notes on this because I am so... It seems like there's always a family member or always somebody when it comes to like royalty, if you will, that always wants something different. Guys, writers out there, love you. You're never going to listen to this. Probably not. But please think of something different. I've seen all of the fairy tales and, stuff like that. And I just wanted it to be a little different because they had so much. Still loved it. I loved the outcome. But that little tiny itty bitty bit of the episode is what I didn't like. Because I've seen it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I find I was going to refer to it as Game of Thrones style political betrayal stuff.
I mean, kind of.
It predates Game of Thrones.
Yeah, it does. But it's kind of in the same realm of family, this, and this, and how it should be, and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, it's just kind of tedious. I mean, one thing I do quite like is that Gladiator and the Imperial Guard are loyal to whoever is the Emperor or the Empress. So... you know, he's fighting to defend Lilandra, but if she loses, he will then be just as loyal towards whoever wins. In this case, what's her name? Deathbird.
Or I called her Deadbird.
Yeah, Deadbird.
Deadbird.
Yeah.
All right, so it doesn't seem like we talked a lot about it, but we kind of summed that part of the episode up.
Yeah.
I think we get, a lot of the emotional Xavier coming up. I mean, more emotional. So let's talk about
I suppose before we move on, let's just actually talk about his vision that takes place. While he is lecturing the Shi'ar on multiculturalism and tolerance and not being an imperialist. So Gambit just turns up out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And towers over them and turns to a skeleton and then breathes fire all over them. There's a globe on Professor X's imaginary desk that does it start spinning and burning, something like that?
Something like that.
Yeah. Indicating that there's turmoil going on. And Professor X becomes aware of the thousands, potentially millions of mutants that have just been murdered. And it sends him into a screaming frenzy. And he's perfectly willing to drop all of the political drama in the Shi'ar Empire to go back to Earth and deal with the mutants and the problems they're facing.
His daddy's got to come home.
Yes, because Lilandra says to him, like, oh, if you leave now, you'll prove them all right. We were so close to winning them over. He goes, I don't care. I'm going home.
Yeah.
Gotta go look after my children.
My babies.
Yeah.
My babies.
Yes, and it's an intrusive vision, isn't it? It's not something
Yeah.
that he wants to happen, but he has now been made aware of. And the thing I really like is the way, I think we talked about this last episode, or I might have just casually touched upon it, but the way that this show adapts multiple different comic book stories, but kind of merges them together. So there's like the whole Operation Zero Tolerance stuff with Bastion. There's the Genoshan Massacre, a la E for Extinction. There's the Mutant Massacre storyline that was orchestrated by Mr. Sinister, and it's kind of blurred them all together to make this different story. And I really like the references that they've included. I found it very, as a long time X-Men comics reader, someone who dropped off about a year into the Krakoan stuff, but I'm dipping my toes back in now that they're moving on. I found it very satisfying and very enjoyable, and very upsetting as well. Like Mary said, it's surprising that you can stir such feelings through some fairly rudimentary drawings. And I do note as well that they use a lot of budget-saving animation tricks in this, but they use them very well.
So it's like you're looking at, it looks like you're looking at a still from a comic.
Yes, in a way.
And I love that so much, because I didn't realize what you were talking about at first. And then when you explained it to me, I was like, oh my God, that does seem like they're doing that. But they did it such a beautiful way. Yeah,
they chose exactly the right moments to cut to close-up of eyes staring ahead. I mean, I know this is in the next episode, but when Cable turns up, you see his reflection in Cyclops' visor.
I loved that so much.
Yeah, and they talk for a couple of seconds, but you don't really see much movement, not awful lot of animation, so it saves money. But it's done tastefully and stylishly.
Yeah, and you have to give credit where credit's due. Not only in, obviously the art department, but in that voice acting department too.
Yes.
Because you feel it. Even though you don't necessarily see it, you're seeing this almost still image. You're still feeling the emotion that is there, whether it's happy, sad, or just neutral. You feel it. So let's talk about the better Storm episode.
Yeah.
So in Life Death Part 2, we get the second part, and my favorite part of the Storm story. So in this, you go back to where her and Forge are, and the owl is still talking to her. And
I've actually forgotten the name of that owl creature. It's like the oh my God, I'm just going to blame it on being unwell. My brain isn't really working properly at the moment,
but we're back in that thing.
In the branch, Forge branch. Yeah, that's it.
And by the way, love the character Forge. But we are having some turmoil, some internal turmoil that I think Storm needed. I think this needed to happen because Storm's character is such a fierce character, and she's the strong, lovely, caring, but she'll call you out on your shit type of character. But this kind of just adds another level to her character. It might be a small level to some people, but for me, I think I felt more of it because we've all kind of had that, not that internal struggle of like losing our rain powers and storm powers.
Speak for yourself.
But we've all had some internal turmoil, with ourselves, whether that's something we went and got help for, whether it's something, like myself, for instance, I go through, internal turmoil every day over something. And I know loads of people do. And again, an animated show made me feel amazing because there's one thing in there. Well, there's a ton of things there, but this one thing in particular, rocks are falling and, Storm's trying to do her thing, her human thing. And then all of a sudden she's like, no. She says it like that. She doesn't say it like, no. She says, no. And that's when you know she's back.
Yeah.
And it just, before you even see her turn into, like, I call it the new Storm, even though it's the old Storm. Yeah. I don't know if it's just me, but I started feeling chills, like these things that just tingles, and I was like, oh my god, it's happening. And then when it did, the first time I saw it, I mean the second time I saw it this morning too, I just felt we needed that. And I don't know if I say we needed that just because I thought character development it just adds a little bit to it, but I don't know if I just needed that too. Like, I needed that. She's not the Storm that will she's not going to be the Storm we knew before. It's going to be a little bit different because she has learned what life is like without her powers. And she realizes that her powers are great, but her powers are nothing without her.
So here's something I've been wondering about this whole life-death story is whether... So in part one, Forge builds the machine that will restore Storm's powers, but for some reason it doesn't work. Now, we know that it's because of Storm's insecurities that she's not able to perform, let's put it that way. I have to wonder if that owl character, whose name I apologise I've forgotten, I should have looked it up beforehand, if they're even real, or if they are a manifestation of Storm's insecurities, because that creature speaks with the same voice as Storm. And I wonder, was Forge really poisoned, or is this all just kind of something that's taking place in Aurora's mind while she's inside of that machine, or after she's come out? Perhaps Forge orchestrated this, that the owl turned up because of Forge's machine. And that is the method of regaining her powers and overcoming her fears and her insecurities. I mean, maybe it's more literal than that, rather than...
it could be a little bit of everything.
Yeah, it could very well be.
But I would like to agree that it's...
Yeah, it just... I mean, this is X-Men. I shouldn't be like talking about realism, but it just seemed kind of far-fetched to me that they're out in the middle of the desert and then this character turns up out of nowhere, poisons Forge, and just tries to upset Storm. Like that's their real aim, is to just upset Storm.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's connected to the machine that Forge built.
Yeah.
Because as we know, if Forge can imagine something, he can build it, and his machinery always works. So I have to wonder if either
that is a good point.
the machine is what brought that manifestation of Storm's insecurities out, or B, it's all part of Forge's treatment. And I don't even know if he genuinely was poisoned. It seems like he was, because at the end of the episode, while he's recovering in bed, he's got the bandage on. But I don't know. I've been thinking about it for the last half an hour or so. Going,
Is it because I asked? I was like, is that the same voice?
Partially, yes. Yeah.
I think you were thinking about it before then as well.
Yes, I had been.
But I think that just kind of like boosted your...
Yeah, because I was thinking it's kind of contrived that this ancient spirit just turns up out of nowhere and is like, oh, today I'm going to poison Forge. Just as Forge is building the machine to cure Storm, and it just so happens that the cure for Forge's ailment requires Storm to overcome her fear of tight spaces. Just seems very contrived, but then again, this is X-Men. They're often contrived stories. Doesn't make them bad, they're just contrived, that's all.
Loved it though.
Yeah, I liked it.
I'm gonna say this, I just wish it was its own standalone episode.
Yeah, I could have done without the Motendo stuff, frankly.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about Bright Eyes.
Yeah, okay, let's move on.
Episode 7. So we start this out at Gambit's funeral with loads of people, loads of, survivors, if you will.
Yeah.
The mutants that weren't in Genosha, but no Rogue.
Yeah.
Because
well, she's off.
Yeah, I'll say what I was going to say in a moment. Rogue went rogue.
Yeah, ba-boom.
Yeah, I've waited to do that joke for like 2 hours.
Yeah, I found it interesting that he was buried in Louisiana. I suppose that's where he's from. But traditionally, when the X-Men died, they get buried on the X-Men grounds. But then you wouldn't have had the cameos from his brother and his ex-wife in the funeral crowd. Is that what you call it? The grievers. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but Nightcrawler's given a very prominent position in this. Yeah. Considering he only met Gambit like once or twice, he knows a lot about him.
But it's... I think the Nightcrawler Gambit thing is, a lot of it has to do with the Rogue Nightcrawler thing.
Yeah.
And he feels like he is, her lover is his brother as well. If that makes sense. Like, yes, that's going to be part of the family.
He views him as his brother-in-law.
Yeah,
yes.
Exactly. It's what
and
I meant to say,
becomes very
in-law.
Interested with him. Yes. That's something we need to talk about, perhaps when we're done talking about the funeral. But essentially... No, I'm going to let you continue talking about the funeral, and then we'll move on to Rogue's background.
Actually not a lot to talk about in terms of the funeral. It was beautifully done. Kind of disappointed that Gambit did just like come out of the coffin and be like, "Hey,
Bonsoir.
my chérie." But yeah, there's a beautiful quote by Wolverine, and I can't not do this episode.
Mm-hmm. You have to do it in Wolverine's voice.
Yeah, even with my squeaky chair in the back. I can't do it in Wolverine's voice. I'm not going to.
Bub.
So, hey, bub. No.
I'm the best there is at what I do, bub.
So, this really hit home with me. It says, or Wolverine said, "Grief's a lonely world." So, I probably mentioned this before, but I was raised by my grandparents, so I was raised by the oldies. Loved that, and unfortunately, I lost my grandmother when I was 21. I'm 36 now, and I lost my grandfather 6-7 years ago now, and I still grieve for them. Because they were my friends. My grandpa was my best friend. And when Wolverine said that, I have to be honest, I did a little bit of a tear because it just felt right. And I wish that I had that particular quote with me when, these things happened. I don't know why I told you guys my life story there, but that's why I got a bit emotional when he said that. And I think a lot of us need to remember that. No matter if we're going through a death
remember it.
Yeah. If we're going through someone's death, if we're going through an illness, if we're going through anything, in the wise words of Wolverine, grief is a lonely world. And then we get Rogue going rogue.
Yes.
And oh my God, does she go rogue?
So one of the things we need to remember about Rogue is that she is her adopted mother's daughter. She used to be part of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. She is very accustomed to smashing stuff up and being unkind to people.
And this is the episode where we remember that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We remember it.
Yeah.
Yes. And the thing that really highlights about Rogue is that she was always capable of doing this, but she was choosing not to. She was choosing to be, the better person by treating her enemies with respect and dignity. This time, not at all. Not at all. She smashes into that Hulk Buster base with General Thunderbolt Ross, grabs him by the throat, and says, "You're going to tell me where Gyrick and Trask are." And I guess he does.
Yeah.
And the thing I really like about this episode is that there's
just a cameo as well.
Yeah, a good cameo from Captain America. But now Captain America is obviously intended to represent the United States, who's like, "Oh, what happened in Genosha was terrible, but I can't support you." Very, very critical of not just American, but kind of Western
ideals.
Yeah, Western ideals, Western policies, where, you know, we'll say stuff like, oh, the war in Ukraine's terrible, we'll send them some money.
But we won't go there ourselves and actually do the dirty work.
Yeah, we won't
that needs to
support
be
our
done.
allies. We'll financially support them. We'll send them some materials and some weapons if they need it, but they can fight their own battles. Mm-hmm. Or any time that there's like a massacre in somewhere like, you know, North Africa or the Middle East, that the Western media doesn't really report on it. They just say, oh yeah, by the way, a suicide bombing happened in Baghdad, lol. That's what happens there. When really, the stance we should be taking is this is terrible. We should be doing everything we can to stop these kind of things from happening across the world, regardless of where it is.
The thing is money. Money will get you really far in this life. But that's not the only thing you should be doing if you're an ally.
Right.
And with the Captain America, it's just, you feel this disappointment and then you realize that's a familiar disappointment because we know this. And that's basically what you've just said, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's just, we know this. And I think that's one of the reasons, like, I felt kind of sick to my stomach because I was like, oh yeah, Captain America, yeah. And then when she says something along the lines of, well, if you were with us, then you'd be out there with us. Something along those lines. And my stomach turned.
Yeah, because Captain America says, you know, if I'm seen in this uniform in Mexico helping you, it sends a message.
Yep.
She's like, yeah, it does. That's why you should do it. And
that you stand with the mutants.
I'm not doing it.
Yeah. And it's, again, this show, even when it was on in the 90s, it is so realistic without being realistic.
Yes.
And you still feel those emotions because they're very real emotions for very real things that are kind of put behind this facade of a comic book.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, they reflect the real world through the science fiction elements.
And all we have to do is literally put a mirror in front of our faces when we're watching this. And then we can say, oh, we as humans do this. Mm-hmm. We stand with you, but we won't go out there with you. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, not we as in like all of us, but it sucks. And I've said that so many times, but it's a reality check in a cartoon.
Mm. And the thing is, this kind of leads to some kind of, I was going to say shocking behaviour from Rogue, but as I said, she was a member of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. She's done worse things. So when she finds Gyrick and he won't tell her what she wants to know, she just takes the information from him by touching him and hospitalises him. And then when she finds Trask, who built that massive Godzilla Sentinel, as Gambit called it, he's trying to cooperate with the X-Men. He wants to bring a stop to what's been going on, but Rogue doesn't forgive him. When he threatens to kill himself before telling them what they need to know, she grabs him and she saves him. He tells them what they want to know, almost in gratitude, I suppose, in a way. And Rogue then goes, all right, thanks, and then lets go of him and drops him to his death.
Yeah.
And she shows no remorse. She doesn't care. She's like, well, think of all the thousands of people he killed.
Yeah.
The world is better off without him. That is just a fact. And I think it was Morph is like, oh, is this who we are now? But Wolverine's just like, yeah, she's right. Absolutely. And of course you'd expect Wolverine to say something like that because he's an edgy, morally grey 90s character as well. Technically, I suppose. When did Wolverine first appear? 80s? Possibly? No, 70s. It was the 70s, yeah. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. But, you know, it shouldn't surprise us at all because she was indoctrinated by Mystique, and as we saw in an earlier episode, she went and trained with Magneto for a few years. So, you know, it shouldn't be surprising that she is more than willing to do unpleasant things if it's right. And
because she has had something wrong happen to her loved ones. And it's not just Gambit. Yes, Gambit is the main reason, but it's not just Gambit. It is her people. The people that she has been trying to protect. The X-Men have been trying to protect mutants. I mean, they've protected, non-mutants as well, but a lot of time, it doesn't matter what situation you're in, cartoon or not cartoon. There are groups of people that need to be protected, and sometimes they don't, and we wish we could do what Rogue did and just let go.
See, the interesting thing is, so you could argue that, she should have arrested him and had him be put on trial and he could be punished properly, right? They did that with Gyrick, and look what happened with him. He got transferred out of that prison and was put in a cushy villa in Mexico where he lived pretty freely. Essentially, there was no punishment. The world was not going to do right by the mutants, by the X-Men. And it's hard to argue against Rogue's stance with Trask. She could easily imagine the same thing happening again. Easily see his creations being misused again. The only way to stop it is to get rid of that information, and the only way to do that is to get rid of him.
So
it's harsh.
I fully believe in prison. But like you said, in the case of prison to him was was a vacation, like he was in a resort.
Yeah.
So what would they do with this fella? Probably the same thing.
They'd put him up in some cushy lab somewhere and have him develop new weapons for killing mutants.
Yeah. And it's one of those moral things where you're like, oh, is it right? Is it wrong? Well, for me, I know what you think, but it's morally gray. You said about Wolverine earlier. Sorry, I interrupted you.
That's fine.
But you said that Wolverine was a morally gray character, and I believe this is one of those things that, although I'm not I am a black and white person, there's a right and there's a wrong in terms of this, because it's fictional. I think you could say that's morally gray.
Oh yeah, absolutely is, because I'm of the opinion that you should never murder anyone.
Yeah.
But then when I see stuff like this, I'm thinking, maybe they should have just thrown him off the building earlier.
And then we have the comeback of Nathan.
Well, yes, because when they kill Trask, it activates the what's it, like a nano sentinel or something like that. He basically becomes like a reanimated corpse. But as a sentinel, a new type of sentinel that is very difficult for them to fight. And then, as you said, Cable turns up.
Yeah.
It's beautiful where Trask is like standing on Cyclops' head or whatever he's doing. And he says, "How does it feel to be left behind by the future?" And then who would turn up to destroy him? Someone from the future. The future has come calling.
Yeah.
And is saying, "You don't belong here. You do not deserve to exist."
Yeah.
Flashbang.
In my notes, I say Nathan helps out.
Yeah.
But literally a flashbang. It's like poop.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like
it was an EMP or something like that.
Whatever.
Some sort of
little
explodey bang bang thing
That's how much I know about weapons.
Yeah.
And then we have the return
Oh, yes.
of Magnus.
Yes, so they do reveal who is behind everything, and it's Bastion. And I have to say, I remember reading the X-Men comics when Bastion was first introduced.
You were disappointed when you saw
Oh,
him.
I was so disappointed. I really don't like Bastion. He's rubbish. He's got that crappy little chinny beard and his really pink skin, and I just don't like his character design very much, and I didn't like the comics that he appeared in. And that scene at the end where he reveals that he's got Magneto tied up in a barbershop and he starts shaving him, that was very homoerotic. And I'm not saying that necessarily as a bad thing, but they do code Bastion as being like a queer character in this a lot.
See, I saw it in a different light.
Did you?
I saw it as Bastion kind of reminding Magnus that he's mutant, but he's human. and he's basically giving like he's tied up, he can't do anything,
Yes,
of
yeah,
this. That's
yeah.
kind of what I took from it.
Yes, yeah, he is asserting his
Yeah.
power over him because he's using a metal object
Yeah.
to shave him. Now, one slip and he could slice his throat. So he's showing the control he has over him, the power
Yeah.
he has, and the fact that it is a metal object that Magneto is accustomed to controlling. It's more of a slap in the face. But I just feel like the whole thing was just... They very deliberately, I feel, code... I've just forgotten his name. My brain's got dead. Bastion as a queer character. And as I said, that's not a bad thing.
No, of course not.
It's just I just found that interesting because, well, maybe I don't know. But anyway, they also have Mr. Sinister being involved, who is another quite I'll call him a camp villain.
Yeah. What I like about this is in the X-Men, and even in, dare I say it, Batman, there are characters that can be considered queer. And I love that they don't, it's neither yes or no, but it's like, you decide. You can decide if you want them to be queer, go ahead. And all that. And I love that so much because it's a cartoon. This is a cartoon, and it's actually showing the LGBTQ plus, not just in the Bastion way, if that's what
not just as villains as often takes place. Yeah,
a lot of the mutants can be, you can see it as it being,
Well, yeah, Morph is non-binary, very explicitly non-binary.
Love that.
And in the Genosha party scene, you could see same-sex couples kissing and dancing and stuff like that. Yeah, it was just presented as normal, as it should be. Don't make a big deal out of it.
Yeah. But yeah, Sinister. I don't like Sinister.
No.
I know you're not supposed to, but...
Yeah, I mean, Mr. Sinister used to be a favourite character, a villain of mine, I should say. Obviously, Magneto is the favourite, and I liked Apocalypse. I like Mr. Sinister. But I don't think Magneto's a villain anymore, I wouldn't say.
I wouldn't say that either. I think he is, this gray thing keeps coming up. He's in that gray area, which in my life, again, I'll say it, there is no gray. There's black or white. There's right and wrong. Whereas Magneto, gray as hell.
Grayer than his hair, which is white.
Yeah.
Before we finish talking about this episode, though, I just remembered one scene we really do need to talk about.
Which is...
So after Rogue drains the information from Gyrick and she goes and collapses in an alleyway in Mexico and just...
Oh my god,
a Nightcrawler turns up and he's just like...
Another teary thing for me.
Hey, sister, how you doing? She's like, not good at all.
And then there's just... which she turns around and she just sees her family.
Yes, the X-Men. Yeah, they're all there. They weren't necessarily there to support her. They were like, hey, we need to go and find...
I know, but they came for her.
Yeah, they came for her.
to get her, which is them being there for her. And
because they needed her to go and help them get Trask. But, they were there for her when they saw she needed support. They were like, oh, yeah, sure, of course, we'll listen to you.
This episode, I mean, the whole Gambit thing and the whole Genosha thing really brought a lot of emotions that I've had these emotions for a while, but sometimes I just shut the door on them and I'm like, no, not right now. But unfortunately, it flooded the door and it was like, oh, I'm here. And it's made me incredibly, although I'm trying to act like I'm fine and everything, it's made me incredibly sad. And it's reminded me that shitty things happen. And a lot of us don't have a Nightcrawler or, a Scott or a Jean or a Professor X. And we go through this life feeling like we're so alone and whatnot. I'm fortunate that I do have my own version of Professor X, and his name is Luke.
I'm losing my hair as well, so maybe I'll embrace it. Just start sitting in a big yellow chair.
When I was younger, like when I was a teenager and in my early 20s, I felt so alone. And when my grandmother passed, I feel like I had a little bit of a moment like that when you and your family, I remember your grandmother called me and it was amazing. And that scene when she looks on the steps, it felt good, but it felt like, shut up, I don't want to remember this.
Bittersweet.
Bittersweet. And I'm like, there are a lot of people in this world that don't have that, and it sucks. And that's basically what I wanted to say. And that this episode really reminds me that it's just stupid things happen, and we all grieve differently. And I mean, the thing that I think we all need to remember the most about this episode is Wolverine is always right. Shall we get to the comments?
Yes. Okay, so the first comment we have is from Lowell Lucas Jr. He says, "Remember It, aka Gambit's badass song. Such a great episode and so much tears. Great coverage, you two. Also, anyone find Exodus celebrating kind of fun? Also, yeah, Boom Boom was partying too." Yeah, I was going to mention Boom Boom, but she kind of like nudges, I think, was it Rogue out of the way in the crowd? Anyway, and we mentioned that we thought Exodus dancing was just kind of silly. The guy with the pink skin and the big white gown.
Yeah.
Oos, oos. He was like, like, I don't know.
90s, like,
like a Vogue almost.
I can't do it because YouTube will.
I know. Well, they can't even see us doing it anyway. So you just have to imagine it, I'm afraid. He continues, completely agree, Scott's in a hard place between Maddie and Jeannie. I'm so glad that the show isn't treating Maddie like an evil clone and turning us against her like the comics. She still has feelings with Scott and shares their experience. Jeannie sees it as cheating, but has to understand Scott doesn't want to abandon anyone, even if he did leave Nate in the room.
That was so funny to me, in like a peculiar and obnoxiously humorous way, because he's like, I'll never do this. And then he does it.
Yeah, Cyclops can be blind sometimes, can't he?
Did you hear that bird? It was just like, as if it was a great, like, whew.
I don't think it got picked up by the mic. You
That's
never know,
okay.
it might have done. All right, so next we have Big Mikey P, Michael Andre Parlon.
Mike P.
Says, the name's Gambit, remember it, hence the episode title. Well, at this point, say goodbye to the Fox Kiddie fare of the animated series and say hello to grimness and grittiness akin to Dragon Ball sequel Dragon Ball Z. I'm never going to say Z, by the way, because I'm not American. Or even from the King Piccolo arc of the former. By the way, this is right on time with me just finishing up on One Man's Worth two-parter. That storyline sure got shockingly more relevant with 97 in mind due to elements like the Rip Van Winkle coffee place waitress becoming the mother of the now infamous Bastion, and the Nimrod Sentinel actually leaving behind a remnant that got absorbed by Bastion's janitor father. Guess the creators took notes from the DCAU Project Achilles / Project Cadmus, Brain, Luthor, Lexiac, and Project Batman Beyond Continuity cavalcades. No shame with the Barbies, Mary. Anyways, Luke, lucky grab with those Teen Titans and the Batman 2004 tie-ins. Although I'm not that big with the X-Men adventures of the X-Men stuff. They're a bit weak since the former's just adaptations of the early animated series stuff. At least the DCAU tie-in comics were almost all originals, while the latter is just an Elseworlds, albeit a surprisingly relevant multiversal tale too. Now that I think about it, being a secret prequel to X-Men the Animated Series is interesting enough, but being attached with the Marvel DC crossover event was quite a Schway move.
Schway.
Go Schway. I thought cheese is allowed for vegan diets, particularly organics and special kinds like, well, almonds and rice. If it's made with animal milk, it is not allowed for vegan diets.
I used to work at Lush. The amount of times I came in with like a cheese sandwich or something and I was told, that's not vegan. I'm like, I didn't say I was.
If Luke is weirded out by how humans first tried out cow's milk, I'm still weirded out by how humans first tried out eggplants. Purple plants should have scared ancient peoples into thinking they're poison, which they are via solanine, albeit only when eating them in unnatural excess. I still have so many questions about Rogue's relationship with Magneto. The animated series never even hinted at that at all, unlike the Batman Beyond stuff about Terry McGinnis and his heritage, in my opinion. Honestly, the creators better have some good explanations come season 2 onwards, lest this becomes a storytelling stain of an ass pull. I don't get the reference, so I'm going to move on. I'm a bit surprised on how X-Men the Animated Series does a lot of shirtless scenes for men and tank top swimwear moments for the women. Not even Batman the Animated Series, The New Batman Adventures and Superman the Animated Series were this fan servicey at times, for lack of a better term. Well, that's interesting actually, because that's the kind of thing that Jim Lee was drawing a lot at the time, and the big instructions from Marvel for this cartoon were to copy Jim Lee's art style as much as possible, and the Claremont scripts as well. So yes, direct reference to all those X-Men swimwear specials they would do back in the day. I really hope the apocalyptic events of 97 Season 1 will become the 9/11 stand-in of Earth 92131. Meantime, the Twin Towers, better be unironically still standing in said universe. After all, multiverse theory may be a bitch, but it is quite kind at places. Trains and Holocaust metaphors are nice, Magneto, but I prefer base Delta Zeros, and what could have been imaginary based on, say, MacArthur's Korean war plan to nuke communist China to oblivion. And if when X-Men the Animated Series gets a sequel storyline and has its own Remember It, I wonder who's going to be martyred. Aunt May, Felicia Hardy the Black Cat, Spider-Man himself? In my opinion, yes, Gambit coming back as a Horseman of Apocalypse is quite something I'm awaiting, but after that he'd better stay dead. Actually, I'm one of those folks who's giddy when death and brutality has finally come to the show. Getting rid of the animated series' lack of stakes is cathartic to say the least. 39 minutes and 13 seconds. Here's to the personal comments. 40 minutes 34 seconds. I'm actually bummed they didn't rescue Cody. What are they going to tell his family, the foolish X-Men? Yeah, so Cody got turned into a space bug and flew off to space with the other infected people and aliens. So yeah, their families are going to be looking around for Cody, and they'll never find him because he flew off into space inside of a big creature, if I remember rightly. Oh dear. So 40 minutes and 58 seconds. Since you didn't understand, I'll clarify. You really didn't need to. Madoka Magica was basically made as a 13-episode saga that still worked well, even when decreased to 12 episodes, and thus felt well-paced and properly character-driven compared to Angel Beasts, which was supposed to last 24 to 26 episodes, like its own spiritual predecessor Clannad, 23+1 alternate universe original video animation for the first season, 24+1 AU over possibly?
Excuse
me. For the second season, called After Story.
Excuse me.
Go on.
Angel Beats, not Angel Beast.
Did I say Angel Beasts?
Yes, you did.
Oh, sorry, Angel Beats, excuse me. Sorry, I'm unwell, and clearly my mouth is moving faster than my brain. Until executive meddling happens. Suffice to say, though AB is still a good show, one can see a lot of missed opportunities because of a woefully shortened runtime. 41 minutes and 45 seconds. I prefer the Terminator system with dark futures actually being alternate universes. X-Men 97 better acknowledge that eventually. 42 minutes 30. You really don't have to comment on like every 10 seconds. It's quite all right. I appreciate you being this engaged, but
Mikey P, you do whatever you want. Don't listen to this grumpy old man.
The poor sick man who's fading away and dying before this very microphone.
You liar.
By the end of this episode, I will just be dead.
No, he won't. He'll be completely alive and well.
You'll hear my spirit leave my body, and on the way out, it'll be like, no more Mikey P comments.
You know what, Mikey P? He says this sometimes about things that I do. So he has said this to me many a time about my Grey's Anatomy.
It's true.
And some of the music I listen to. He's learned from that, though.
I'm going to continue this comment.
Because I love Mikey P. And Mikey P, don't you listen to Luke. This is my podcast. Go listen to his on his channel. If you want to listen to a grumpy guy.
I'm going to start my own podcast on my own with no comments. How about that?
You wouldn't dare.
Comments switched off. That'll learn you.
I'll stop commenting.
You don't comment anyway.
No. Again, this is all like fun and games, by the way.
42 minutes and 30 seconds. Shockingly, sometime after the last Flipside video released, a release of the old Marvel vs. Capcom titles up to Marvel vs. Capcom 2 got announced. Time will tell if they'll end up selling like hotcakes in Steam or GOG. The last thing I want is another Sonic Origins mess. Yeah, well, I'll just get it on PlayStation. The thing I'm most interested in is whether these will be arcade faithful ports or if they're ports of the old PS1 versions, because the old PS1 versions of those games were slightly limited. I'm told that the Saturn versions were much more arcade faithful, but I never played them. Obviously, I played Marvel vs. Capcom 2 on the Dreamcast, and I aced it. I unlocked all the characters, pretty much all of the costumes. My go-to team on Marvel vs. Capcom 2, not that anyone was asking, was Cable, Iron Man, and then I would sometimes cycle in either Ryu or... who else? My mind's gone blank. Sometimes Captain America, because when we do our combined Ultra moves, it would do like 200 hits. And that was very good for the last boss. But anyway, I'm extending this long comment already. I'll shut up now for people that aren't interested in the video games.
Sorry, what?
42 minutes and 52 seconds. Wait, you also know and are fond with the TIE Fighter video game? Yeah, I used to play that a lot on the PC back in the day. 43 minutes and 2 seconds. Now that was a meandering, distracting in every season 2 episode, the Savage Land subplot. Should have been their own episode or two, akin to how J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings paced the Aragorn and co arc with Frodo and Sam, plus Gollum arc in books 3 to 6. 43 and 11. Speaking of which, I actually like seeing Captain America, Iron Man, or War Machine, the Wasp, Giant Man, Daredevil, and what appears to be Ben Reilly, Spider-Man fighting the mutants versus human conflict from the aforementioned One Man's Worth 2-parter. Hope that also becomes harsh foreshadowing for events later in 97. 43:39, I was talking about the sequel Across, though, Mary. 44 and 3. Watchtower Database has already done timelines of the DC animated universe, so when some cadre of fans are going to do the same for X-Men and 97 and Spider-Man, I'd assume they already had. But I don't know, so we'll have to see. 46:45. Do go ahead, but do be aware that only partial to the book stuff and the Lord of the Rings movies. The Hobbit movies, the Mordor games, and Rings of Power may be outside of my preferable jurisdiction. Lucky there with meeting Ian. One can argue he's better than meeting Patrick Stewart and William Shatner. I don't know, Mary would explode if she met Sir Pat Stew.
Yes, I would, because I've met Gandalf. And now I need to meet Professor X. And that would be... I could die. I mean, I've married the man of my dreams. Was just a living, breathing man.
I was going to say nightmares.
I'm joking. No, the man of my dreams. Someone that loves me unconditionally. Well, sometimes with conditions. I need to brush my teeth every day. And I've met Gandalf. I've gone to the Killers.
You saw Frodo as well in Berwick Street.
I saw his neck, and I cannot
You saw the back of his head, because I was like, oh, there's Martin Freeman over there. And you
I recognized it. And that's what kind of creeps me out a little bit.
Did I call him Bilbo or Frodo?
You called him Frodo just now.
Sorry,
which
it's
was
Bilbo.
I was looking
Sorry,
at
Bilbo.
you like, that's not him.
Sorry, my bad.
Yeah.
I'm unwell, I apologise.
Carry on.
Anyway, continuing Mikey P's comment. Not a fan of the Logan Scott Jean love triangle. Even TV Tropes deems it as values dissonance. I prefer love triangles that end more amicably, with acceptingly humble characters like Minori Kushida and Tomoyo Daidoji staying blessed in return despite being third wheels. I'm just falling apart here.
You're so bad at these names.
I know. I don't know what he's talking about. I'm sorry.
Oh, by the way, do you guys know why Luke does the comments? Because I'm a very fast reader, but when I try to read out loud, even if Luke is the only person in the room, I get so nervous, and I just I fumble and mumble, and Meh.
I'm not doing a great job. I must admit.
That's why he does the comments.
Yeah. All right, so we're on the home stretch now. So 50:38 for me. Batman and Superman grew on personal tastes more. Better animation, above average voice acting, and far more balanced sense of doing years-long story arcs, even in the sequel series. Hint, hint, the best Spider-Man cartoon in all but name and subject, Batman Beyond, and the crossovers and continuity smorgasbord Justice League and Justice League Unlimited made them age better and almost always uncontested by their competition. Not that also into the space and Shi'ar settings of X-Men. I'm a guy who prefers literally down-to-earth setups, battling rogue military ops and vile commies and neo-Nazis. Battling Martians, James Bond space station terrorists and rogue space colonies is so last generation. How long will the Tolerance is Extinction podcast last? You can answer that question. How long's that episode going to be, Mary?
Which one?
The next one, I think.
I don't know yet. We haven't recorded it.
We're giving ourselves the hour time limit, so it won't be longer than usual.
Yeah.
Moving on, so we have Elfin Lied with a string of numbers afterwards.
Hello.
Regular commenter on my videos. I think it's the first time in a while that they've commented on one of the podcasts, so thank you for doing that. I think Magneto's quote, "We shall not spend our lives wondering how many more we could have saved," is a reference to Liam Neeson's character near the end of Schindler's List, when he's lamenting over the fact he could have saved more lives if he had thought to sell the multiple pieces of gold jewellery he was wearing. Yes, that is an excellent callback right there. Yes, very, very well observed. And I appreciate you including the proper quote, which I didn't at the time. I was like, I can't remember what you said, but it's something along the lines of...
Do you want to know something? And I might have mentioned this before. I love movies, and I like a lot of my favorite movies are from before the golden age of Hollywood. I gotta admit this, and I might have already admitted it. I've not seen Schindler's List.
Bum, bum, bum.
I will watch it.
You should. It's a good movie.
Have any of you guys seen the brilliant, the amazing Sweepings? No?
Do you know, I don't think I have actually watched Sweepings.
I don't think you have.
No, because you remember we looked for it on DVD over here and it didn't come out.
No.
And I don't think you could buy it digitally at the time, but I've not looked in recent
I don't think
years.
you could buy it digitally now, but it's, I believe, Lionel Barrymore. I believe it was Lionel Barrymore. It was either I get the Barrymores mixed up other than Drew. She's my favorite. But, yeah, that's a beautiful movie, by the way. Beautiful.
I always conflate it with the Days of Wine and Roses in my head, and I don't know why, because they're not about the same thing.
No, they're not.
Anyway, moving on to the final comment, which is from David Carney. Hello, David.
Hi, David.
Hi, Mary and Luke. It's almost like I knew he was going to say that.
Okay.
I love how X-Men 97 has pulled elements from the comics. When Marvel create a clone, I feel they don't treat them as a person, unlike X-Men 97. X-Men 97 could be one of the best adaptations of the X-Men ever. I'm currently on the hunt for Batman #2 from the New 52. Have a good week, both of you. I have 2 copies of that, so if you ever desperately wanted one, let me know.
Hey, David.
Yeah.
Let me know.
Yeah, but
well,
I'm sure.
Let Luke know, not me.
I'm sure you could find a reasonably priced one in some online retailer.
David, where are you? Are you in the States or are you in the UK?
I think David's in the States. I could be mistaken. Let me know if I'm wrong, David. All right. That was the last comment. We're out. I guess the last thing to talk about is what we're talking about next time, but we've kind of already said what we're talking about next time.
I'm wearing a skirt today. That should be the last thing we talk about.
Okay, yes.
It's flowy.
Airy.
It's cute. That's it. That's all I have to say about my skirt.
All right, next time we're going to talk about the final 3 episodes of X-Men 97, Tolerance's Extinction, parts 1 through 3. We're just going to do it all in one episode, because otherwise we'd end up talking for nearly 6 months about X-Men 97, which, as much as I would love to do that.
Yeah, I have been going through the older X-Men.
Yes.
Fell asleep to it the
Yes,
other
you
day.
fell asleep to it. I was sitting here editing, I think it was the Batgirl video late at night, and she was like, "You need to come to bed now." And I was like, No, I'm far too busy. I'll be there when I'm there. And then I hear previously on X-Men from the bedroom thing, and she's trying to lure me to sleep, but it's not going to work. And then I was sat there listening to hearing Sabretooth going, "Let him go," and I was like, "Oh, okay, that's from the second episode."
I've ran out of. I've watched Family Guy and American Dad multiple times before bed, and I've run out of those until I forget all of them again, and I'm not allowed to go to sleep. It's one of the only rules in my life. I'm not allowed to go to sleep with Law & Order SVU on anymore. I don't think anybody else should either.
No.
Or the there's this guy I used to fall asleep to named Chills.
Oh God.
I love him. He did some pretty gnarly list of pretty gnarly things.
Everything was either done by aliens or Bigfoot.
Yeah.
And it's like somebody's dry cleaning went missing. Some people think that maybe it was Bigfoot.
I love chills. And by the way, don't talk about Bigfoot like he's not my dad. You know I have to have a Yeti for a father.
Of course. No.
Even though I'm really short.
Suddenly everything makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, so I love you guys. I'm going to let Luke cough it up.
I'm going to go and die.
He's not going to die. We will talk to you on the flip side.
This is the sound of my spirit leaving.
Shut up.